And
well,
you might disagree
where
with that, but the reason why I would
there,
push hard against somebody that says, no, it's all social conditioning is because if you agree with that, or I'm curious, I'll ask you. So if you think a large part of it is social conditioning, why can't we just make camps?
I think it's all social conditioning.
Okay, if it's all social conditioning, why can't we just make camps to trans people?
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
He said a boo-boo there.
Well, no, but that's the real
Demon
question.
Mama's coming.
That's the real question. If everything's social, why can't you just trans people socially?
Why can't no, because at the same time I recognize that these environmental you can't just overcome environmental conditioning.
But you could with more environmental conditioning. That's why it's environmental conditioning, right? It's an external factor that we theoretically can change, right?
Yeah, in certain cases, but at the same time, for example, if I'm environmentally conditioned to I don't completely disagree with you, and actually this is a point that I brought up with something like pedophilia, right? Where a lot of people.
So do you think he's actually going to answer the question?
Doesn't sound like it. It sounds like he's going to try to call Destiny a pedophile. Like, what the fuck? Why you can't have these conversations without bringing up pedophilia?
Well, he's not calling, to be fair, he's not calling Destiny a pedophile, but
I don't understand why he needs to go to pedophilia.
Well, you'll see. But spoiler warning, Rem never addresses this point. Okay.
Right.
Why, if it's all social, why can't you just trans people with more social conditioning?
Right. And not only that, inadvertently, he's going to make an argument that pedophilia is fucking biological, which I find repulsive.
No, he's going to make the opposite argument.
Oh, it's social conditioning?
Yes.
Repulsive.
If you accept, I mean, people got mad at me when I said that you should engage and support something like conversion therapy treatment for pedophiles, because legitimately that actually seems like a legitimate form of solving that issue, and that's what the science seems to support. And at the same time, that means perhaps suggesting that something like conversion.
So, to my knowledge, back when I was in school a million years ago, they believed that pedophilia was mostly biological, that people were generally born with this attraction, that you don't really learn to be attracted to children. So I don't, and part of the reason they think this is because they have been wildly unsuccessful at trying to socially condition or teach people who are pedophiles to not be attracted to.
I mean, they've
children.
gone as far as like chemical castration and stuff like that.
Yeah, but that's not to change their internal thought process.
Yeah, but
I'm
saying it still doesn't work. I'm saying they still commit.
Well, some of them, yes. The chemical castration does work to some people because the way chemical castration works is you can't get it up anymore. You don't have the sexual desires. But some people, you're right, but some people still do have some internal mental sexual desire and they still act upon it.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, so
therapy, homosexual or not, is a possibility that could occur. If it's perhaps suggesting that something like conversion therapy for being homosexual or not is a possibility that could occur if we admit that it is environmental conditioning. But that doesn't support obviously doing anything like that, because there's absolutely zero reason to, because it absolutely harms no one, right? As opposed to something like pedophilia, where all the stresses that exist in society can lead you.
But this is very silly.
Oh no, those heavy sighs are coming out.
Well, let me finish this sentence first.
Doing anything like that, because there's absolutely zero reason to, because it absolutely harms no one, right? As opposed to something like pedophilia, where all the stresses that exist in society can lead you to do something that is really, really harmful.
Here's a question.
First of all, that's such a weird way of conceptualizing pedophilia. The stresses of society make you do something harmful?
Yeah.
No.
He's not really blaming it on the pedophile at all, is he?
Right.
It's blamed on society. That's
weird.
That's a standard leftist conception of people doing wrong. It's never the individual's fault. It's always society's fault. Society pushed them into doing this. Society left them no choice. They had to do it.
It's interesting because it's like inverted self-serving bias.
Big time. Yeah.
Yeah. But Which, yeah, I mean, that's first of all, like, we both disagree. You shouldn't conceptualize pedophilia that way. Pedophilia is someone who's attracted to children and they're acting upon that. Okay, it's not because society is stressing them. So like, I'm so stressed at my job, I just have to fuck a child. Like, I don't
know that's like.
I don't think that's how anyone
Sitch,
conceptualizes.
why did you say that? Don't say that.
There you go. There's your clip.
I know. Come on.
Right. But
don't get stressed at work anymore, Sitch. Jeez.
But his argument doesn't address the gay question, which is like, well, if being gay is merely social
pressure, exactly.
Why can't
He's making the conservative argument.
Well, no, but he's saying, well, his only defense against that is saying, well, being gay doesn't harm anyone. And it's like, okay, well, you might think that, but if you're Christian and you believe that you're going to burn in hell for all eternity, that's a pretty big harm.
Yes,
okay, it's
totally.
not right. And
and in the trans situation, you're literally having to modify your entire body.
Right, but that's an entirely different. Obviously, the trans one would be even worse because it's like, well, there is a tangible harm outside of religion in that you are feeling bad about yourself. Your quality of life is not very good.
Right.
You might kill yourself. And then also if you transition, you could,
face medical.
You could
condition for life.
Yeah, you can have medical conditions. You can sterilize yourself. Or also you could just not transition very well and it just doesn't really help.
True.
There's all sorts of problems associated with that. So, but with the gay thing, it's like, well, it's silly. If you take away the born this way argument, if you take away, first of all, you're just denying science. Okay. And it's funny because I think it was like last year or a while ago, Rem had this big argument with Destiny where he was basically yelling at him like, oh, there's all these people, all these political pundits, and all they do is they talk about politics and philosophy, but they don't actually know anything about philosophy. And it's so irresponsible that all these people are talking about these conversations. Yeah, and they don't understand philosophy well enough to have a conversation. And he had this whole like hour-long rant about this. And I'm like, the same person is sitting here making these claims about being gay and being trans as being purely social. He doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. Okay. There is mountains and mountains of evidence that say being gay is biological, having gender dysphoria is biological, and that there's mountains of evidence saying that there's a biological gender difference in the average man and the average woman. So this is science denialism to the extreme. This is, I bet he would complain about people on the right denying climate change or whatever. It's like, it's the same level of science denialism, even worse, I'd imagine, because I think there's a lot more evidence for the gender stuff, a lot more solid evidence.
Yeah.
Someone posted on Twitter the other day, they did this massive meta-analysis from 2019 of all the gendered toy studies, which is when they basically get young children and they'll put them in a room that has a bunch of, quote, gendered toys. So you have like males, like the cars and the trucks and things like that. And then the, quote, female toys are dolls and houses and things like that. And they'll see, okay, what toys will kids play with if they're not prompted by an adult? Okay. Mm-hmm. And they do this for kids of all ages. So like as young as possible, up to like 5, 6, 7, just to see like how kids with very little, because you say, okay, well, like as a 7-month-old or a 1-year-old's going to have like a lot of social gender conditioning, like they could, but not really. And they find the same results every time. Every time. Significant results always show that boys prefer quote, boy toys more on average, and girls prefer more, quote, girl toys on average.
Yeah.
And then it gets even crazier because they've literally done the same study with monkeys.
I know, with primates.
They've done this study with chimpanzees. They've done this study with bonobos. They've done it with other primates.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they had the same
Always
fucking gender preferences as the humans. And you're like, well, unless the argument is that the chimpanzees have, the same, patriarchy that humans have, and they have the same oppressive gender norms that are socially conditioned. What the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah. Leonard Sachs goes into this and why gender matters too, about the different, because even in adulthood, the chimpanzees, it's the males that are the ones that eat meat and chase other. They're generally more meat eaters. So
right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm curious what the number is. How many mammals are sexually dimorphic species that have gender roles? Because it seems like so many animals, it seems like almost every animal, they're sexually dimorphic, and there is some kind of gendered role built into the animal to some
Gendered
degree.
behavior.
Gendered behavior, I guess, would be a
Yeah.
better term than gender role. Yeah, there's a gendered
Yeah.
behavior built into it. And they've even done the toy study with what you were talking about, with girls that have CAH,
Yes.
which is when girls
And
have
they play with the trucks.
right. It's when a girl was born with a naturally high testosterone
levels in the
right
in utero. Yeah.
in utero. Yes, and they found that girls like that play with the quote boy toys.
They also the interesting study there too is also adolescent boys tell violent stories.
Right.
And that's very strange in adolescent females. Unless they have this condition, then they tell violent stories too, and it's completely normal. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah. There's big gender differences. Yeah, it's not a social construct.
I know.
This is completely anti-science to go there. It's so bizarre that all of this stuff has captured mainstream media's attention. Poor Leonard Sachs wrote this book like 10 years ago, 15 years ago. It never went anywhere. Well, society didn't pick up.
It's so annoying because like the way a lot of psychology and psychological research works is that there are like trends, okay?
Yeah.
So you had a lot in like the 50s, 60s, and 70s was when people started to realize that you could like condition behaviors and stuff. And so a lot of the psychological trends was like, well, everything is environmental, everything is cultural. But then when they started to learn more about genetics, like in the 80s and 90s, suddenly they started switching to like a genetic understanding of behavior in psychology. And then now it's even progressed further into, well, there's epigenetics and there's other things, but they're still very focused on biological causes, and there being a biological and social correlation connection with every psychological issue, with every behavior. There's like an interplay here, and that maybe you can't simply say something is biological and something is social. That's kind of mixed together, and they reinforce
I think they're leaning
other.
more towards biology has the advantage, though. It seems like every time I read more, it seems like
they are leaning heavily towards that. Biology is a far greater factor in behavior than they,
because of the twin studies that they were able to do
because
recently.
A lot of different things. Yeah. But the problem is, and the reason I bring up these periods of time is because all of this neo-Marxist leftist nonsense all theoretically started to come about in the 60s and 70s. And so that's why it's all built into the concept of like the blank slate human being, because that was what psychology said at the time. And so it's like never progressed beyond its origination point in understanding of human behavior.
Yeah.